win. You're our champion. Oh, oh, oh. We lift our voice, we celebrate our champion. We sing hello, hallelujah, for the King who is victorious. We lift our hands, we lift our voice, we celebrate our champion. We sing hello, hallelujah, for the King who is victorious. You are the awesome one, and there is none like you. Please win, you're our champion. Oh, you are the awesome one, and there is none like you. With you we win, you're our champion. With you we can't lose, we always win, you're our champion. Oh, we lift our hands, we lift our voice, we celebrate for the King who is victorious. We lift our hands, we lift our voice, we celebrate our champion. We sing hello, hallelujah, for the King who is victorious. You are the awesome one, and there's none like you. Champion. Oh, you are the awesome one, and there is none like you. With you we win, you're our champion. With you we can't lose, we always win, you're our champion. Oh, we lift our hands, we lift our voice, we celebrate our champion. We sing hello, hallelujah, for the King who is victorious. We lift our hands, we lift our voice, we celebrate our champion. We sing hello, hallelujah, for the King who is victorious. You are the awesome one, and there's none like you. With you we win, you're our champion. With you we can't lose, we always win, you're our champion. Oh, you are the awesome one, and there's none like you. With you we win, you're our champion. With you we can't lose, we always win. You're our champion. Oh, we appreciate him for allowing us to come back. I pray that you had a great time during your time eating. As we have come back, let us turn our attention back to Shema chapter 21 and we're at verse 19. And let's read 8 verses, please.
If he rises again and walks about outside with his staff, then he who struck him shall be acquitted. He shall only pay for the loss of his time and shall provide for him to be thoroughly healed. And if a man beats his male or female servant with a rod so that he dies under his hand, he shall surely be punished. Notwithstanding, if he remains alive a day or two, he shall not be punished, for he is his property. If men fight and hurt a woman with child, so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no lasting harm follows, he shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman's ish imposes on him, and he shall pay as the judges determine. And if any lasting harm follows, then you shall give life for life, eye for an eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, stripe for stripe. If a man strikes the eye of his male or female servant and destroys it, he shall let him go free for the sake of his eye. And it is so.
And it is so. Verse 19 all the way to 27. You read to 27? Read 8 verses.
And if he knocks out the tooth of his male or female servant, he shall let him go free for the sake of his tooth. And it is so.
And it is so. All right. Walk abroad upon his staff. Let's look at that. Means that upon which he relied, his physical strength. Hence, if he returns to his normal state of health and vigor, and is not dependent for the ability to walk like an invalid upon the support of others, if the injured man walks abroad on his staff to be understood literally, and so aggravates his wounds and dies, the man who dealt the blow is clear from the penalty of death, even if he dies after a considerable length of time. And on this point, the law differs from liability for striking a slave who dies after a short illness. Once again, as we are talking about the judgments, going over, this is what is called Mishpatim, which is in the English judgments, looking at the civil laws that were put in place for the children of Yasharal. Earlier, as we looked at some discrepancies and then looked at some things that needed to be brought forward and made clarity concerning. It's very important that we understand, number one, when we look at certain terminologies like slave and master, these were things that were put into to interpret what was being done, which we know there were no slaves in our time because we didn't put our people in slavery, but you could basically lend yourself out for work. You could go and submit yourself to someone for work. And so it was important that we understand that, yes, there was a contract and money would be involved in this. And so it was to better both parties. If one went to the person and said, hey, I am poor and I need to work for you, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically lend my services, but in lending my services, payment is going to be required. It's the same thing when you go and work for a temp agency. Believe it or not, if you want to call that slavery or call yourself an indentured servant, these are the things that come about. So an indentured servant is one who is able to sell themselves, or not sell themselves, but able to go in and render their services at a price. When you go to as I said, if you go to agency, a temp agency, then what ends up happening, you work for that individual, which now pays you, but the people that are paying you are actually the people that you go in and you work for. You're not working for the company until you get hired full time with that company. There is a middle person there, and that middle person basically takes you and sells you to the highest bidder, so that you may job probably pays $20 an hour. You just get a portion of it. Why? Because the company that's basically putting your information out there gets a portion of that money as well. So we can kind of transform. Again, one of the important things is to understand is the system that is being set up here. Why is it important to understand that these things had to be put in place? Once again, you have to understand the children of Yasharal are coming out of a situation of slavery. They're coming out of Mitzrayim, and they were all slaves. They were bondmen, and they were servants. And so it is important that we understand that when you come out of a lifestyle and come out of that, there are certain preliminaries and certain laws and instructions that have to be put in place. And these are the civil laws that follow the laws that were put in place. So it's important that we understand what follows after that. And so this is dealing with a person. It lets us know if he rises again and walks about, but you have to look at verse 18 to find out what's going on here. If a man contends with each other or contend with each other, and one strikes the other with a stone or with his fist, and he does not die, but is confined to his bed, then verse 19 helps us to understand better what is taking place here. Even if he fights what we would say dirty, he takes up a clod or a fistful of dirt and hits the man, or a dirt rock, and hit him in the head or hit him anywhere in his body, and he is incapacitated for a little bit, even for a long period of time. Verse 19 says, if he rises again and walks about outside with his staff, without help and without anything, excuse me, then he who struck him shall be acquitted. In other words, he will not be liable if he was permanently damaged. If he was permanently his time, and shall provide for him to be thorough. He has to the person's bills. Guess what ends up happening? They go to jail. Now, what does that say? That means that the person that has committed this heinous crime, whether it was death or whether it was somebody that got brutally beat, they end up going to jail, or they end up going and presenting themselves to do community service, which helps you, which does not help the victim or the victim's family at all. This is why when we have situations like this, it is better for us to go to the judges of Yasharal. Now, somebody would say, well, where are our judges? Great question, because we need them in place for situations like these. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Very important, because once again, if you go to the judicial system that America has set up, you're going to do community time, or you're going to go to jail. And basically, and he aggravates his wounds and dies, the man shall who dealt the flow of things, and it is not time for him to do so. So the man that basically dealt the blow is free from all charges, because he's already paid what is necessary. Very important for us to understand. Okay, be quit. The attacker is detained in prison until it is known whether the victim will recover or not. But as soon as the latter walks abroad, he is freed. In other words, once the results are brought forth, then this person now is freed and able to go. But watch this. They are still responsible for paying and helping or taking care of this man's livelihood while he is incapacitated. Bills, he is responsible for that. As I said before, our way is better, because now the person doesn't get 3 hots in a cot. They are responsible for the harm and the change that they have caused in the lives of these people. Now, once again, you look at all the victims victims that we have in our, when I say community, I'm talking about at large as a nation of people. The stuff that our people have suffered, well, you have to understand that follows under the curse of the Bedouin, chapter 28. The reason this is happening is because so many of our people are still walking in disobedience. Does this mean, excuse me, that this disallows the judgment or the structure that we are supposed to follow under? Absolutely not. This is what should make us want to press in harder to keep these instructions and follow them so that we can make sure that judgment is being done accordingly and that nobody suffers unjustly because the balances are not based upon the Torah. Right. And it is so. All right. Excuse me. Now, be thoroughly healed. The cost of medical treatment has to be paid for him. So that means the one who caused this is responsible for that. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
All right. Now, when we look at verse 20, we're going to look at this and then we're going to go to verse 28. His bondman, that is his heathen slave who has no personal status in law, but is the property, his money of his master. Although the premeditated killing of the bondman, seeing that he is a human being, is already covered by the general law. He that smiteth a man, in verse 12, he is here legislated for specially, has case being covered by the regulation contained in the next verse. In other words, even if you have somebody that is not Yasharal, it still keeps us at a place that we are still responsible for adhering and esteeming life.
Right.
You just can't go killing people just because they're not Yasharalites. Well, they're not, in the walk and in the way, and because they're for me, then I just slay them because they are not a part of that. No, it's still things in place to regulate so that people won't just be killing people just because. Are you hearing me? Because then you become a savage and you become just like the people that oppressed our people. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
This is very important for us to understand. All right. All right, let's jump to 23. I know I said 27, but let's jump to 23. Let's look at 23. Now, we know what verse 22 says, and we talked about this the year before last and last year. And this was verse 22. As we look at verse 23, was very interesting. If men fight and hurt a woman with child, so that she gives birth prematurely, yet no lasting harm follows, he shall surely be punished accordingly as the woman's ish imposes on him, and he shall the judges determine. Now we were asking the question, how in the world with a woman with child, it didn't say how far along she was, how could she get injured when these two men began to fight? If men fight and hurt a woman with child, we had so many scenarios because we see so many situations like this pop up. So the determining factor, as we looked at it, was, okay, why would a woman with child be even in the vicinity or even be nearby? Well, we said it could be a couple of cases, some different things.